The rifle shot cracked through the morning air, scattering a flock of startled birds from the nearby cottonwoods as Rosalyn Pierce lowered her Winchester, a satisfied smile playing across her sun-kissed face. The tin can that had been perched on the fence post 50 yards away now lay in the dust, another victim of her impeccable aim. "That makes 20 in a row, Pa," she called over her shoulder, her chestnut hair streaming in the breeze as she turned. Sheriff Thomas Pierce nodded with grudging approval, though concern shadowed his weathered features. "Your aim's as true as ever, Rosie, but when are you going to put down that rifle and take up needlepoint like the other girls in town?" Rosalyn blew a stray strand of hair from her face and gave her father a look that could have withered a cactus. "The day I take up needlepoint is the day hell freezes over and the devil goes ice skating." It was 1878 in the bustling town of Copper Creek, Arizona Territory. At 22, Rosalyn Pierce was known throughout the county for three things: her skill with firearms, her stubborn defiance of convention, and the fact that she'd turned down more marriage proposals than any woman west of the Mississippi. "Mrs. Abernathy mentioned her son's coming home from back east next week," her father said casually, examining the brim of his hat. "Harvard educated, going to take over the bank." "That's nice for Mrs. Abernathy," Rosalyn replied, reloading her rifle with practiced ease. "I'm sure he's a fine fellow who'll make some docile woman very happy someday," Sheriff Pierce sighed. "Rosie, you can't keep living like this." A woman needs whatever she decides she needs, Pa," she interrupted, her green eyes flashing. "And I need freedom, not some man telling me to mind my place." The sheriff looked at his daughter with a mixture of pride and exasperation. Ever since her mother had died when Rosalyn was 12, she'd grown increasingly wild and independent. She could outshoot, outride, and outsmart most men in the territory. What she couldn't seem to do was fit into the narrow confines of what society expected from a woman. "You're too wild to marry," he muttered, not for the first time. "That's what people are saying in town." "Good," Rosalyn replied, shouldering her rifle. "Then maybe they'll stop trying to pair me off with every eligible bachelor who rides through." The thunder of approaching hoofbeats interrupted their familiar argument. A cloud of dust appeared on the horizon, gradually resolving into the form of a rider pushing his horse hard. "Trouble," Sheriff Pierce said grimly, his hand automatically moving to the revolver at his hip. The rider, a young ranch hand from the Double R spread outside of town, practically fell from his horse when he reached them. "Sheriff, there's been a robbery at the Copper Creek Bank. 3 men armed to the teeth. They've got hostages." Sheriff Pierce's face hardened. "How long ago?" "Not 15 minutes, sir. I was just leaving town when I heard the shots." Rosalyn was already striding toward the stable. "I'll saddle Thunder." "You'll do no such thing," her father commanded. "This isn't one of your adventures, Rosie. These are dangerous men." She turned, her jaw set stubbornly. "I'm a better shot than any deputy you've got, and you know it. You need me." For a moment, father and daughter locked eyes in silent battle, then the sheriff's shoulders slumped slightly. "You stay behind me, you hear? And if shooting starts, you find cover." "Yes, sir," she replied, though they both knew she'd do whatever she thought necessary when the time came. 10 minutes later, they thundered into town, the sheriff, Rosalyn, and 2 hastily deputized men. Main Street was eerily quiet, storefronts shuttered as word of the robbery spread. Outside the bank, a small crowd had gathered at a cautious distance. "They're still inside," whispered Mrs. Holloway, the milliner. 3 men with bandanas over their faces. "They've got Mr. Jenkins and 2 customers." Sheriff Pierce dismounted, motioning for the others to do the same. "Spread out. Davis, take the back. Miller, the side alley." "Rosalyn," he broke off, fixing her with a stern look. "I know, Pa, stay out of trouble," she said, sliding her rifle from its scabbard, but her eyes were already scanning the surrounding buildings, looking for a vantage point. While her father cautiously approached the bank, calling out to the robbers inside, Rosalyn slipped away. She knew Copper Creek better than anyone. including the fact that Widow Henderson's boarding house had a second-story window that looked directly into the bank's main floor. Climbing the back stairs silently, she made her way to room 2B, which she knew was vacant. The window was unlocked, a stroke of luck. Easing it open, she had a clear view into the bank 20 yards away. 3 men with bandanas stood inside, revolvers drawn. Mr. Jenkins, the bank manager, and 2 women cowered behind the counter. One of the robbers was stuffing money into a sack, while the tallest one, clearly the leader, kept watch at the window. Rosalyn took a deep breath, steadying her rifle on the windowsill. She had a clean shot at the leader, but if she took it, the others might panic and start shooting the hostages. She needed to wait for the right moment. The standoff lasted another 10 minutes, with her father's voice floating up from the street, trying to negotiate. The robbers were growing increasingly agitated. The leader gestured for one of the women to be brought forward, Mrs. Davis, the schoolteacher. Rosalyn's heart raced as she watched him press his revolver to the terrified woman's temple. "We're coming out, Sheriff," he shouted. "And we're bringing your fine citizens with us. Anyone tries to stop us, they die first." That was when Rosalyn noticed something. A mirror on the bank wall gave her a reflection of the back door. It was opening slowly, revealing her father's deputy, Davis, sneaking in with his gun drawn. The leader hadn't seen him yet, but it was only a matter of seconds. Rosalyn made her decision in an instant. She fired. The shot shattered the bank window and struck the leader's gun hand. He screamed, the revolver clattering to the floor. In the ensuing chaos, Deputy Davis burst in from the back, Sheriff Pierce from the front, and the hostages dove for cover. It was over in seconds. 2 robbers surrendered immediately. The leader made a desperate lunge for his fallen weapon and caught a bullet from Sheriff Pierce's revolver for his trouble. Later, as the town doctor tended to the leader's wounds, non-fatal but certainly painful, Sheriff Pierce found his daughter sitting on the steps of the bank. "That was some shot," he said quietly, sitting beside her. "Could have gone bad a dozen different ways." "But it didn't," she replied, though her hands still trembled slightly from the aftermath of tension. He nodded slowly. "No, it didn't. You saved lives today, Rosie." After a moment, he added, "That doesn't mean I approve of you ignoring my orders." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "I wouldn't be your daughter if I didn't, Pa." The commotion around them grew as townspeople emerged to see the captured robbers being led to the jail. Mrs. Davis, the schoolteacher, broke free from a concerned group and rushed over to Rosalyn, enveloping her in a tearful embrace. "You saved my life," she sobbed. "That horrible man was going to use me as a shield. I can never repay you." Rosalyn awkwardly patted the woman's back. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," came a deep voice from behind them. "Not anyone." Rosalyn turned to find herself looking up at a stranger, tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes the color of a summer sky and a face that would have been handsome if not for the thin scar running along his jaw. He wore the practical clothes of a working cowboy, though of finer quality than most, and the badge pinned to his vest identified him as a U.S. Marshal Clayton Caldwell, he introduced himself, touching the brim of his hat. "I was tracking those bank robbers from Tucson. Seems I arrived just in time to miss all the excitement." His gaze lingered on Rosalyn's rifle. "That was some impressive shooting, Miss." "Pierce," she supplied, suddenly conscious of her wind-blown hair and dusty riding clothes. "Rosalyn Pierce, the sheriff's daughter," he nodded. "I've heard stories." Something in his tone made her bristle. "All true, I'm sure, especially the ones about me being too wild to marry and unfit for polite society." To her surprise, he laughed, a warm, genuine sound that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Actually, the stories I heard were about the best shot in the Arizona Territory, who happens to be a woman with more courage than most men I know." He glanced at the bank, then back at her. "Now I see they weren't exaggerated." Before she could formulate a response, he tipped his hat again. "If you'll excuse me, Miss Pierce, I need to speak with your father about these prisoners. Perhaps we'll have a chance to talk again." As he walked away, Rosalyn found herself watching his retreating figure with uncharacteristic interest. For the first time in her life, a man had looked at her not with disapproval for what she was, but with admiration. It was unsettling. The following days brought an unexpected change to Copper Creek. Marshal Clayton Caldwell, it seemed, had business that would keep him in town for some time. The bank robbers were part of a larger gang that had been terrorizing banks and stagecoaches across 3 territories, and he was determined to round up the remaining members. Sheriff Pierce, recognizing the value of federal assistance, had offered the marshal the use of a desk in his office and whatever local knowledge might help. Rosalyn found herself encountering him frequently at her father's house for dinner, at the sheriff's office when she brought her father lunch, in town as she went about her business. Each time, he greeted her with the same quiet respect, asking her opinion on local matters and treating her insights with genuine consideration. It was a novel experience, and one she wasn't entirely sure how to respond to. "You know," her father commented one evening as they sat on the porch after dinner, "Marshal Caldwell seems to think highly of your tracking abilities." Rosalyn continued polishing her rifle. "Does he now?" Mentioned he could use someone who knows the territory to help track down the remaining gang members. The sheriff studied his daughter's face carefully. "I told him you were the best tracker I know." Her hands stilled. "You're suggesting I help a U.S. Marshal hunt dangerous criminals?" "I'm suggesting," he said slowly, "that for once, your particular talents might be appreciated rather than criticized." The next morning found Rosalyn and Marshal Caldwell riding out of town at dawn, following reports of suspicious activity near Rattlesnake Canyon. The marshal had accepted her assistance without question, treating her as he might any deputy or fellow lawman. "Your father says you can read sign better than any Apache scout he's known," he commented as they followed a faint trail through the scrubland. "My mother was half Navajo," she replied. "She taught me before she passed, said the land speaks to those who know how to listen." He nodded thoughtfully. "My grandmother was Cherokee. She used to say something similar." Rosalyn glanced at him in surprise. "You don't look Indian," he finished with a wry smile. "That's what most people say. My father was as Irish as they come, so I favor him in appearance." He shrugged, "But I learned a great deal from my grandmother's people before they were forced to move west." The conversation shifted their relationship somehow, establishing a connection neither had expected. As they rode, they discovered other commonalities. Both had lost parents young, both loved the freedom of the open country, both felt caught between worlds in different ways. By midday, they'd found clear signs that 3 riders had passed through the area recently, heading toward an abandoned mining camp in the foothills. Approaching cautiously, they left their horses tethered in a grove of cottonwoods and continued on foot. The old camp consisted of a few dilapidated shacks and the sagging entrance to a played-out silver mine. From their position behind a tumble of boulders, they could see 2 horses tethered outside the largest shack. "At least 2 inside," Clayton whispered. "Maybe more if some are in the mine." Rosalyn studied the ground. "Only 2 sets of boot prints going in. Recent." He nodded, then outlined his plan. He would approach from the front, drawing their attention while she circled behind to cut off any escape through the back. "These men are killers," he warned. "Don't take any unnecessary risks." She raised an eyebrow. "I think I've proven I can handle myself." "You have," he agreed seriously. "That's why I'm trusting you to watch my back." The simple statement, delivered without condescension, caught her off guard. Men had complimented her shooting before, usually with surprise or amusement. None had ever simply trusted her skills as a matter of course. They separated, with Clayton making his way down toward the front of the shack, while Rosalyn circled through the scrub to position herself at the rear. The plan worked perfectly until a loose stone skittered under Clayton's boot, alerting the men inside. Suddenly, gunfire erupted from the shack's windows. Clayton dove behind an old water trough as bullets splintered the wood around him. Rosalyn, seeing his predicament, took careful aim at the window where the muzzle flashes originated. Her shot struck true, eliciting a cry of pain from inside. The distraction allowed Clayton to make a dash for better cover beside the shack itself. But as he moved, a third outlaw, previously unseen, emerged from the mine entrance with a rifle raised. Rosalyn's heart nearly stopped as she saw him taking aim at Clayton's back. Without conscious thought, she fired. The outlaw crumpled, her bullet finding his shoulder. Clayton whirled at the sound, saw the threat, and quickly disarmed the wounded man. What followed was a brief but intense standoff, ending with the remaining outlaws surrendering once they realized they were outmaneuvered. As Clayton secured the prisoners, Rosalyn approached, her rifle still at the ready. "You saved my life," he said simply when their eyes met. "Anyone would have done the same," she echoed her words from days before. His eyes held hers. "No, not anyone." The ride back to town was longer, slowed by the need to bring the prisoners. They made camp for the night in a sheltered draw, the outlaws securely bound and under watch. After a simple meal of beans and coffee, Rosalyn and Clayton sat by the fire, speaking in low voices to avoid being overheard by their captives. "You never said why you became a marshal," she ventured. He stared into the flames for a long moment. "My younger brother was killed by outlaws when I was 20, stagecoach robbery gone wrong." His voice was quiet but steady. "He was just 16, heading east to school." "I'm sorry," she said softly. "After that, I couldn't see doing anything else but bringing men like that to justice." He looked up at her. "What about you? Why do you choose to live the way you do when it would be easier to conform?" It was her turn to study the fire. "My mother believed a woman could be strong and gentle both. After she died, it seemed the world only wanted me to be the latter." She shrugged. "I decided to be what I am, not what others thought I should be." "And what are you, Rosalyn Pierce?" he asked, his voice deepening. She met his gaze across the flames. "Free." Something shifted in his expression, understanding, perhaps, or recognition. "Freedom's a precious thing." "Worth fighting for." "Worth living for," she corrected. They fell silent, but it was a comfortable silence filled with unspoken understanding. When she finally rose to take her turn at watch, he caught her hand briefly. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For being exactly who you are." The weeks that followed saw them working together regularly as the investigation into the outlaw gang deepened. What began as professional respect gradually evolved into friendship, and then into something neither was quite prepared to name. The town noticed. Whispers followed them, the wild Pierce girl and the handsome Marshal. Some approved, seeing Rosalyn's energy channeled into something useful for once. Others predicted disaster, certain that no man, lawman or otherwise, could tame Rosalyn Pierce. Mrs. Abernathy cornered her one afternoon at the general store. "I hear you've been spending quite a lot of time with Marshal Caldwell," she said, examining a bolt of calico with suspicious intensity. "The Marshal and I have been working together on his investigation," Rosalyn replied evenly. Well, he seems a fine gentleman. Perhaps he might succeed where others have failed." The older woman gave her a meaningful look. "A woman your age should be thinking about settling down, dear, even one with your unusual proclivities." Rosalyn's grip tightened on her basket. "I'm not looking to be settled, Mrs. Abernathy, and Marshal Caldwell isn't looking to settle me." But that night, as she brushed her hair before bed, her father's words from the doorway startled her. "You care for him." It wasn't a question. She met her father's eyes in the mirror. "He's a good man, a good marshal." Sheriff Pierce shook his head slowly. "That's not what I mean, and you know it." She set down her brush. "What difference does it make? He'll finish his investigation and move on. That's what marshals do." "Unless they have a reason to stay," her father suggested gently. "I won't be anyone's reason for changing their life," she said firmly, "and I won't change mine for anyone else." The sheriff studied his daughter's face. "Did he ask you to?" The question gave her pause. "No," she admitted. "He's never asked me to be different." "Then maybe," her father said softly, "he loves who you already are." The thought followed her into restless dreams, dreams where Clayton Caldwell rode away and others where he stayed but expected her to become someone else, someone diminished. She woke before dawn, unsettled and confused. Her opportunity to confront these feelings came sooner than expected. Word reached town that the remaining members of the outlaw gang had been spotted near Broken Arrow Pass, planning one final robbery before fleeing to Mexico. Clayton immediately began preparations to intercept them. "It's too dangerous," he told Rosalyn when she insisted on accompanying him. "This is the core of the gang, the most desperate and violent members. Which is precisely why you need someone watching your back," she countered. "Someone who knows the territory and can handle herself in a fight." Their argument drew the attention of the entire sheriff's office. Finally, Clayton pulled her outside for privacy. "Rosalyn," he said, his voice low and intense, "these men have nothing to lose. I can't risk." "Can't risk what?" she demanded. "My life. That's not your decision to make." "Can't risk you," he finished, his blue eyes dark with emotion. The simple statement silenced her momentarily. "Why?" she finally asked. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Because somewhere between tracking outlaws and riding across this God-forsaken territory, I fell in love with you." The confession hung in the air between them, unexpected and transformative. Rosalyn stared at him, her heart hammering in her chest. "That's not fair," she whispered. "Love rarely is," he replied with a faint smile. "I won't be the reason you die because you're distracted protecting me instead of watching your own back. And I won't be the reason you stay behind when every instinct tells you to ride," he countered. "We go together, as equals." Together, they devised a plan and set out at dusk, traveling through the night to reach Broken Arrow Pass by morning. Their information suggested the gang would attempt to rob the Southern Pacific payroll wagon as it passed through the narrow canyon. Dawn found them positioned on the canyon rim, having left their horses hidden in a grove half a mile back. Below, the road wound through the pass, still empty in the early morning light. "They'll come from the south end," Clayton predicted, studying the terrain. "Set up an ambush where the road narrows by those boulders." Rosalyn nodded in agreement. "We have the advantage from up here, but once the shooting starts, they'll look for cover." They didn't have long to wait. Within the hour, 4 riders appeared at the south end of the canyon, moving slowly as they searched for the ideal ambush spot. Clayton and Rosalyn exchanged a glance. These were their quarry. The outlaws dismounted near the boulders, positioning themselves on either side of the road. One climbed to a perch similar to Rosalyn and Clayton's vantage point, though further south. "The lookout," Clayton murmured. "We need to take him first or he'll pick us off when we move on the others." Rosalyn studied the distance. "It's a difficult shot from here. Can you make it?" She met his eyes. "Yes," he nodded, complete trust in his expression. "On your shot, then." Rosalyn took her position, bracing her rifle carefully. The distance was considerable, the angle tricky. She controlled her breathing, focusing entirely on the target. When she squeezed the trigger, the report echoed through the canyon. The lookout fell without a sound. Below, the other outlaws scrambled for cover, confused by the unexpected shot. Clayton was already moving, working his way down a narrow trail to approach from behind while they were distracted. Rosalyn provided covering fire, forcing the gang to keep their heads down. She watched anxiously as Clayton made his way closer, vulnerable during his descent. When he reached the canyon floor, he signaled to her he would flush them out, driving them toward the north end where a steep wall would trap them. It was a good plan, until one of the outlaws spotted him. Gunfire erupted, and Clayton dove behind a boulder as bullets kicked up dust around him. From her position, Rosalyn could see another gang member circling behind, trying to outflank him. She fired, striking the ground at the man's feet. He ducked back, but now they knew there was a second shooter. One of them began scanning the rim, looking for her position. It was a dangerous stalemate. Clayton pinned down, unable to move without exposing himself, and Rosalyn's position soon to be discovered. Decision time. Rosalyn backed away from the rim, running in a crouch to where a steep game trail led down to the canyon floor. It would put her behind the outlaws, but expose her completely during the descent. She didn't hesitate. Moving as quietly as possible, she made her way down, grateful for the continued gunfire that masked any sounds she might make. When she reached the bottom, she circled wide through the scrub brush, coming up behind the outlaw's position, 3 men all focused on Clayton's boulder. None aware of her approach, she raised her rifle. "U.S. Marshal," she shouted. "Drop your weapons," the outlaws whirled in shock. One immediately threw down his gun. Another raised his hands slowly. But the third, a hard-faced man with a jagged scar across his forehead, swung his revolver toward her. 2 shots rang out simultaneously. The outlaw fell, a bullet in his chest from Rosalyn's rifle. But her shoulder exploded in pain as his bullet grazed her, spinning her half around. "Rosalyn!" Clayton's voice was raw with fear as he broke cover, rushing to her side while keeping his revolver trained on the remaining outlaws. "I'm all right," she gasped, pressing her hand to the bleeding wound. "Just a graze." He secured the prisoners quickly, then tended to her injury with gentle hands. The wound was painful but superficial. She'd been lucky. "That was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I've ever seen," he told her as he bandaged her shoulder with strips torn from his own shirt. "Sometimes they're the same thing," she replied with a faint smile, his hands stilled. "I almost lost you, but you didn't." She met his gaze steadily. "And I didn't lose you. That's what partners do. They watch each other's backs." "Partners," he repeated softly. "Is that what we are?" She thought of all the words that might define what lay between them: colleagues, friends, maybe something more. None seemed adequate. "We're whatever we choose to be," she finally said. "Isn't that what freedom means?" The journey back to Copper Creek was slow, mindful of Rosalyn's injury and the need to guard their prisoners. They arrived to a hero's welcome. The notorious Blackwater gang had terrorized the territory for nearly 2 years, and their capture was cause for celebration. Sheriff Pierce nearly wept with relief when he saw his daughter, wounded but alive. The town doctor pronounced the wound clean and healing well. By nightfall, the outlaws were secured in jail, and Rosalyn was resting comfortably in her own bed, though chafing at the doctor's orders to remain there. Clayton came to visit the next evening, hat in hand, as he stood awkwardly in the doorway of her bedroom. "Your father said I could come up," he explained, "if you're feeling well enough for visitors." She smiled, setting aside the book she'd been reading. "I'm going mad with boredom, so yes, very well enough." He pulled a chair to her bedside, his expression serious. "I've been thinking about what happens next." Her heart constricted painfully. "You'll be leaving, I expect, now that the gang's been captured." "That's what I've been thinking about," he said slowly. "My assignment here is complete. I should report back to the federal marshal's office in Tucson." She nodded, working to keep her expression neutral. "Of course, you have responsibilities." "I do," he agreed, "but I also have choices." He leaned forward, taking her hand in his. "Rosalyn, I've never met anyone like you. You're the strongest, most remarkable woman I've ever known." "But," she prompted, hearing the hesitation in his voice. "No buts," he said firmly, "only possibilities." He took a deep breath. "The territorial governor has offered me a position, special deputy marshal for the Northern Territory, based here in Copper Creek." Hope flared within her. "And are you going to accept?" "That depends," he said carefully, "on whether I have a reason to stay." She met his gaze steadily. "I can't be the only reason, Clayton. That's too much responsibility for anyone to bear." "You're not the only reason," he assured her. "The work is important. It's what I'm meant to do, but you—" He squeezed her hand. "You make me want to build a life, not just do a job." "What kind of life did you have in mind?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "One where we ride together," he said simply. "Where neither of us tries to change the other. Where your strength and my respect for it are the foundation of something lasting." Tears pricked at her eyes unexpectedly. "People say I'm too wild to marry." Clayton's smile was tender as he reached out to brush a strand of hair from her face. Then don't marry, ride beside me forever instead. She caught his hand, pressing it to her cheek. Is there a difference? Only in what other people think, he replied. And when have you ever cared about that? Her laugh was watery but genuine. Never. So, he held her gaze, vulnerable and hopeful at once. Yes, she whispered. Yes to riding beside you, yes to building a life together, yes to all of it. His kiss was gentle, mindful of her injury but full of promise. When they parted, his blue eyes were bright with emotion. I love you exactly as you are, Rosalyn Pierce, wild and free and extraordinary. And I love you, she replied, for seeing me truly. 3 months later, the town of Copper Creek witnessed something they'd never expected to see: Rosalyn Pierce in a wedding dress. It was, however, a wedding dress unlike any other, paired with leather riding boots beneath the hem, and a small revolver strapped to her thigh, a fact known only to her and her maid of honor, but much speculated about by the townspeople. Sheriff Pierce walked his daughter down the aisle of the small church, his face a mixture of pride and disbelief. Clayton waited at the altar, resplendent in a new black suit, his badge polished and gleaming on his chest. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. When the minister reached the traditional vows about obeying, Clayton raised a hand to stop him. We have our own vows, he explained. Turning to Rosalyn, he took both her hands in his. I vow to ride beside you, not ahead or behind, to respect your freedom as I respect my own. To love you not despite your wildness, but because of it, and to build a partnership where we are both stronger together than apart. Tears shimmered in Rosalyn's eyes as she spoke her own vows. I promise to share your path, to watch your back in danger and stand at your side in peace. To love you with the same fierceness with which I love freedom, and to build a life with you where we both remain true to ourselves even as we grow together. The minister, somewhat flustered by this departure from tradition, quickly concluded the ceremony. I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. Clayton did so to enthusiastic applause from the assembled townspeople. As they turned to face their friends and family, he whispered in her ear, ready to ride, Mrs. Caldwell. Her smile was radiant. Forever, Marshal Caldwell, forever. And ride they did. The years that followed saw them become legends in the Arizona Territory. The Marshal and his wild wife, who brought law to the lawless places, who treated all people with justice and respect regardless of background, who built a home that welcomed travelers and strays of all kinds. They had children, eventually 2 daughters, and a son who grew up learning both their father's sense of justice and their mother's fierce independence. They built a ranch outside of town where Rosalyn trained horses when not helping Clayton with his marshal duties. The sign at the entrance read, Wild Horse Ranch, a tribute to the spirit that had brought them together. 10 years after their wedding, Clayton found Rosalyn sitting on their porch at sunset, watching their children playing in the yard. He settled beside her, taking her hand in his as he had thousands of times before. Any regrets? He asked softly. She turned to him, the years having added a few lines to her face but none to her spirit. About what? Being too wild to marry, he replied with a smile. She laughed, the sound as free and joyful as ever. I never did marry, remember? I just decided to ride beside you forever. He pulled her close, pressing his lips to her temple. And what a ride it's been. The best, she agreed, leaning into his embrace. And we're nowhere near the end of the trail. As the sun sank below the distant mountains, painting the sky in fiery gold and crimson, they sat together in the comfortable silence of those who had found in each other not a cage, but wings.